I'm Caryl Greenberg, born May 25th, 1928, and my parents were Ann Winthrop Berkavasi and Moses, known as Mo Berkavasi. The first house that I lived in, and I really haven't lived in very many different houses, but the first one was on 38th and Cass, a duplex that my mother had inherited from her father, who was not living at the time I was born. Actually, I think it was one of my mother's great disappointments that her father didn't know my father, because she knew how much he would have loved and admired him. Um, when I was very small, both my Bobby Wintrobe and my Uncle Sam Wintrobe lived with us. I suppose because the duplex was left to my mother, and they needed someplace to live, and that's kind of the way it was in those days. My Uncle Sam moved out. I'm not sure how old I was, probably not very old, but Bobby lived with us until, I'm pretty sure, until Judy was born, which was 6.5 years after I came along. Daddy at the time worked for the Internal Revenue Service I guess at that time I didn't realize it, but income taxes hadn't been around for very long, and I guess he kind of grew up with them and was with them until I was, I'd say, about 12 years old. Now, I'll talk about that a little bit later. We were very close with my dad's family, and both of his parents were living until I was into high school, and in fact, my Bobby Berkavasi lived until I was in university. Sundays were almost always spent at their house. Uh, Daddy was the oldest, and so my Aunt Ida, who was next to the youngest, my Uncle Is, who was youngest, still lived there. I adored both of them. They were so good to me. Aunt Ida would come over and bring me paper dolls. Lots of times on Sunday when we were going to Bubby's for dinner, Uncle Is would walk over, and we would walk back together. I think it was a couple of miles, but we had a good time walking, and as I now realize it, he was a teenager, and sort of amazing that um, a teenager took that much interest in his niece, but he did to me and to all the cousins and my sister who came along later. Aunt Beck had been married and divorced. Um, she moved back, and she also lived with Bobby and Zadie at the time, and had a daughter who died when she was, oh, I think about 6 years old, and I was very young. I don't remember her. Um, and thinking back, she could have been a little bitter toward me because uh, she lost her precious daughter. It was quite the opposite with me, and again with all her nieces and nephews. She was wonderful to us, and we learned a lot from her. She was a career woman when most women weren't, but she had to work and make money, and was a very bright lady, and worked for Aaron Fair and Sons, and I think was an integral part of that organization for many years. I know that because I know she always got wonderful presents for them on her anniversaries. My Uncle Jay, who was um, third in line, married Ethel Kramer from Des Moines when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. I remember going to the wedding in a car that somebody lent my dad. Was a Packard, and those funny things that you remember, but everybody thought it was a really neat car, and we drove to Des Moines for the wedding. As I say, I was maybe 6 years old. Um, I'll go back because I didn't say where Daddy and Mother came from. Um, Daddy was born in Romania. He was about 4 when he came over. And as I'm sure many other people have said, our grandparents in that era did not talk very much about where they came from or what they had done or why they came. Obviously, they all came because times were not wonderful. I think that maybe up until the time or shortly before they left Romania, things may not have been so bad because the engagement pictures of them are very contemporary and uh, and very beautiful as opposed to the pictures that you see of people who came from Russia, where my Winthrop grandparents came from. Mother was, um, I think, about 2 when she came over, and most of her siblings, if not all, were born. Well, all of she was born in Russia. I'm getting confused. They were all born in Russia. Um, I think they all came at a similar time because of the family picture of them, with the exception of her oldest sister who came later. The family picture of them has a little inset that they had sent. Um, as I say, Mother was very close with her family, but we seem to see more of Daddy's family um, in those early years. When we did see Mother's family, and it was not because of animosity, it was probably because of time, um, that she and I, or she and Judy and I, would go visit some of them without Daddy. Usually, when we went to our Burkabasi grandparents, it was all of us together. When I was about, oh, probably 6, I met a girl my own age who lived down the street from us. I'm not sure whether they had just moved in. I suppose they had. And we became very, very close friends. Um, she was Catholic, and I was Jewish, obviously. It didn't seem to make a bit of difference to her. I'm not sure how her parents felt about it, but I was always welcome in their home. I was almost always there. Christmas and Easter, when I couldn't eat the Easter candy because it was always Pesach time, and we didn't do that, but it was fun to go over. Uh, they were quite wealthy, particularly uh, recognizing that those were Depression times. And as a matter of fact, Daddy got rid of his car because it was just one of those expenses that he couldn't afford at the time. We made out because there were streetcars. The streetcar was maybe a block and a half from our house. And gosh, I even remember I went downtown by myself and was met by my parents downtown at times when I was 7 years old. You can't imagine letting a child even outside of the house now at 7 years old, let alone taking public transportation. But that's what we did. I went to school at Saunders, which was about 3 blocks from home, and I loved school. In fact, I think in kindergarten and first grade I cried summer vacation because I had to wait all that time to go back. I really loved school and usually did well. Um, I was at Saunders until, well, through seventh grade, and um, then we moved to 53rd and Blondo. I got to finish seventh grade, and it was devastating at the time not to be able to go to eighth grade with the people that I had been with all those years, and I knew that the eighth grade teacher was going to be somebody that I really liked, but it was more than Mother and Daddy wanted to do to schlep me off to school every day, and so I transferred to Rose Hill. Interesting that right now, uh, Rose Hill has gone through a huge transformation, and one of these days I think I'd like to go over and see it. But until then, it's been a very old school. The first teacher I had at Rose Hill was the first teacher in my life I ever didn't like. And I really didn't like her. I didn't think she was a good teacher. But I had to be in that class because it didn't make any difference what your former teachers had said. If you were new in that school, you went to the class of the kids who weren't as smart as the kids who were in the other class, which I suppose was part of the reason I didn't like it. And the other part was I just didn't like that teacher. Uh, One of the really great things that happened when we moved was uh, I met somebody who lived not too far away. We are still very, very good friends. That is Uni Denenberg, then Uni Feldman. We went to school together. We went to high school together. If one of us got a ride to school, the other one did. We were half a block away from each other, and so spent a lot of time. Um, and it's always been a very, very good friendship. As a matter of fact, Uni was one of my bridesmaids. What have I left out? A lot.
Tell me about
But
the first house you lived in. What was it like?
it was a duplex that had 3 bedrooms, had a living room, dining room, kitchen. It was very nice. It's still standing. And as I say, I lived there until I was in seventh grade. And it was the neighborhood of Cathedral, so there were a lot of Catholics. Um, it was a neighborhood that is very close to what has been known as the Gold Coast of Omaha, 38th between Dodge and Cumming. And so there were a lot of diverse people, and as I say, a lot of Catholics because um, Cathedral was right there. Uh, Not too many Jewish families, but as a matter of fact, uh, sometime during the time that we lived there, Edith and Paul Goldstein moved in and rented from Mother and Daddy. And I always loved babies, and so I had a lot of fun with the 3 Goldstein boys. And Edith and Paul were always very, very nice to both Judy and me. It was nice living next door. On the other side, for maybe just a year or two, Carolyn and Herman Cully moved in, and Carolyn was a lovely, lovely lady and was always very nice to us. As I say, they didn't live there very long, but long enough for me to get to know her. And as a matter of fact, in our early married years, when Carolyn was an interior designer, she helped us with our not our first, but our second apartment, and it was always fun working with her. So uh, somehow these people that you meet when you're very young, you just always have or at least I do, always have a certain feeling about. On my mother's side, some of the people that I was very close to was um, her oldest sister's granddaughter, now Jerry Trachtenberg. We were very close in age, and we used to spend quite a bit of time together. We took dancing lessons together, and every time we talk about it, we giggle because uh, we were not the two Graces. But we had fun, and we took those lessons on Saturday, and after dancing lessons, we each got a quarter, and for that quarter, we went either to Brandeis Cafeteria or Metropolitan Drugstore, had lunch, for quarter, mind you, for had lunch, had a nickel for a candy bar, and a dime for the picture show. And we spent many, many Saturday afternoons together that way. And another cousin on that side, uh, Lois Winthrop Bernstein, who was a little bit older than I, but we also were very, very close. Um, Her mother and dad, Anita and Will Winthrop, uh, were not wealthy by any means, but kind and generous with their time. I remember times when mother and daddy went out of town, and this was probably when I was in high school. Um, Either Judy or I or both of us would stay there, and uh, they also didn't live too far from us, and so going over there was something I did often. Lois was in high school when I was still in grade school, and even when I was in high school, she was a couple years ahead. So I loved listening to all the things she had to tell me about high school. That was great. Another relative on mother's side was Ruth Banger Selden. Ruth was mother's niece, but uh, as close to mother in age as Ruth's dad because he was among the oldest and mother was the youngest. When we moved to 53rd Street, Ruth and Mo Wenger lived just a few houses away, so that was another back and forth. And Ruth also was a lot of fun, had a heart as big as all outdoors, and we sometimes stayed there overnight also if maybe mother and daddy were out of town, or maybe just because it was fun to do that. Um, I learned a lot from Ruth. Ruth adored people. She always wanted people around her. She always had somebody over for dinner, and she would call on mother and maybe a couple of other cousins to come help. They weren't necessarily invited because she entertained so often, uh, but if Ruth was having a party, everybody gathered over there to peel potatoes, to do this, to do that, just because she wanted people around. And I learned a lot about entertaining from her as well as from my mother, who was also a very good hostess, but did not do the entertaining extensively that Ruth did. The war came along, and that was Second World War, not the First World War, Second World War came along when I was in, what was I in? Seventh or eighth grade. And though certainly a lot of living centered around that, and a lot of family conversation, of course, centered around that. Uh, but I suppose by and large, as a youngster, it didn't have a great impact on me. I had, well, I shouldn't, the only close relative uh, that I can think of, really close one, was Ernie Wintrobe. And of course, Ruth worried tremendously about him. Their father was still living. Their mother had died um, when Ernie was young, and Ruth really acted as his mother and took very good care of him and certainly worried about him during the war. But he was about the only close relative that was involved, and thank God nothing bad happened to him. So that those war years just seemed to be the way life was. I think it was right before my senior year in high school that the war ended, and of course, as, as everybody knew, there was tremendous celebration. I'll go back a little bit to another friend of mine, Jeannie Galinsky-Levy from Sioux City at that time. I met her when I was 12 and was sent to Camp JCC. I guess Mother and Daddy thought it was time that I went away for a while. 2 weeks. The first week I was dreadfully lonesome and wanted to come home, but that wasn't an option. I met Jeannie. We were not in the same cabin, but we became very good friends. After camp, um we visited back and forth every summer and many Christmas vacations. She also was one of my bridesmaids, and we still keep in touch. She and her husband, Ed Levy, live in Arizona, and we don't talk or correspond a lot, but there's that wonderful feeling of people you grew up with, and she's terrific, and I'm very happy to call her my friend. How did I get on that subject?
I want you to tell me about that first duplex you lived in. Tell me
Hmm.
about the rooms in it.
Tell me about the rooms in it.
Yes.
Um, Living room, dining room, kitchen, and 3 bedrooms upstairs. Um, what do you want to know about it?
Did you and your sister share a bedroom?
No, we didn't. We didn't have to. Every once in a while, Bobby Wintrobe would move back in with us for a while because wherever she was living wasn't satisfactory. Then, of course, she had 1 bedroom, and Judy and I would share a bedroom. But mostly, we had our separate bedrooms. She was 6.5 years younger than I, and um, it's kind of a natural sibling um, feeling. Sometimes we loved each other. Sometimes we didn't like each other at all. We both loved paper dolls, and there were always paper dolls in the Sunday paper, and we argued over those. And I guess when we went to Bubby's house, we tried to get the other set or another set, but somehow the ones that were in our Sunday paper were the best ones, and that's what we wanted, and that's what we fought over all the time. I also remember being in 8th grade or high school, and Uni would come over, and we would dash up to my bedroom, and poor Judy would come up behind us before she got anywhere near the door was slammed, and she was done. Um, about the time that I went away to college was the time that Judy and I became very, very close, and still are. I know that things work out if two sisters have to be in a different city, but I certainly am delighted, and I know she is too, that we are together um, for a good part of our married life. We lived very close to each other, and that was when the kids were growing up, and that was always neat. And I'll go into that a little bit more also. I'll go back to high school and university.
Before you do, I still want to go back to
You
that
still want to
duplex.
go back to that duplex?
I want to find out how many bathrooms did you have?
One,
And did you manage?
of course.
It worked out.
It worked out. One bathroom, one television, probably one radio. Certainly, I mean, television wasn't even around then. So
How about air conditioning?
I don't think so. Um, the only air conditioning was if it was really hot. No, it wasn't that house. It was the other house that had a porch. I don't think that house had a front porch. I don't think that one had a back porch. The other one did. And my Bobby Wintrow always, not always, but sometimes would want to take us out there to sleep. And for some reason, maybe Mother and Daddy thought we'd fall over the banister or something, but they didn't like the idea. But no, there was certainly no air conditioning. I do remember that many people during that time would take blankets to the lawn at Central High School and sleep overnight down there when their homes became unbearable. Um, we never did that. I'm sure Mother and Daddy didn't think that was quite the proper thing to do. But during the day, the shades would be pulled so you'd keep the heat out, and at night, the windows were open. But no, there definitely
Tell me
was
about
no
holidays. How did you spend holidays at home?
um, particularly Jewish holidays. Mostly at our house. I think when I was very young, we may have had a couple of seders at uh, my Berkavasi grandparents, but they both were not in great health, so they were not able to have seders. Um, Mother and Daddy did, uh, and sometimes Uncle Iz would come and Aunt Beck. Um, I think maybe early on they must have stayed home to keep my grandparents company and to enjoy Seder with them. But they were always a big event. Uh, my dad was very, very knowledgeable Jewishly. He was very knowledgeable about just about everything. He was a brilliant man. But he conducted Seders largely in Hebrew, and we either followed or whispered to to each other, but we were pretty well behaved and listened and waited for dinner. My dad had two cousins, Rose and Rebecca Babe Siegel, who neither one of them ever married, and they also were a very close part of our family, more like sisters to mother and daddy than cousins, and also very, very good to me, and I loved them to pieces. They were with us uh, for Pesach, for Rosh Hashanah, and there was always big dinner, fun dinner. During the war, uh, there were very often a couple of soldiers at the table for, especially for Pesach, when they wanted someplace to come celebrate Jewishly. They were they were great, no matter who was there. We always went to services. We belonged to Bethel. Mother and Daddy were not among the founders, but they joined very early on, probably a year or two after the synagogue was established, and that also was an integral part of our life. And as a matter of fact, Rabbi David Goldstein was very forward-looking, and when he learned about bat mitzvahs, he wanted Bethel to have girls become bat mitzvah. He spoke with some of the men who he knew would acquiesce. One of them, in fact, the first bat mitzvah at the synagogue was I can't think of her first name. Kulikowski. Ruthie Kulikowski was the first one to be bat mitzvah. Jeannie Blacker Lipsy was the second. And then there were four of us who studied with Cantor Edgar, and how the poor man lived through it all, I'll never know, because we were at that giggly age, and we would giggle at everything. But the four of us, and as I think of it, it's really sad. I'm the only one who's still living. The others were Audrey Wolfe Kirschenbaum, Doris Levinson Haken, and and Bernice Summer Bramson. Bernice, known as Bunny, I think was last, because nobody wanted to follow her. She had a beautiful, beautiful voice, and did very well. We all did. It was it was very exciting and very scary. It was a time when Friday night services were late, and we conducted services from start to finish on Friday night, and did quite a bit on Saturday morning too, including Haftorah. We did not, I don't think anybody even thought of women reading Torah at that time, but we did a lot of the service, and I know that Bethel was in the forefront of conservative synagogues doing bat mitzvahs. So it's something that I look back on with great pride, that I was among the first.
Caryl, with your father's background being from Romania, did you eat any foods that are different than what we think of as being normal Jewish foods?
Probably. Mama Liga, which is corn, like, I guess, cornmeal mush, but Bobby Berkavasi made that, and I remember her stirring and stirring and stirring and stirring, and it was wonderful. Um, Zadie would go to um, whatever market he happened to go to on Sunday morning. Uh, he would bring back smoked fish, and I don't think that was particularly Romanian, but he also would always bring back the what we now think of as Greek olives. He called them mousselinus, and those were a part of dinner. Eggplant probably was more Romanian than anything else. Again, my Bubby would slice it paper thin and pan fry it, and it was a real treat. And I'm not sure whether halava was um, particularly Romanian, but that also was a Sunday night treat. Uh, but I think the mamaliga and the eggplant, also eggplant relish, which I guess that's what we called it, was eggplant relish, with a lot of garlic, and I'm sure that was more Mediterranean and Romanian um, than Russian, because a lot of our Russian friends have no clue about that.
Now let's go back to high school.
Okay. Um, Again, I loved high school. Um, I did not have a lot of dates. Some of my friends did, some didn't, but we got together. It's a time when I became good friends with Eleanor Bernstein, now Eleanor Alexander, Charlotte Katzman-Zapersky. There was a group of us that I must have been our junior year, really got together, and we called ourselves the Naive Nine. And I think we were very naive. That's certainly what people would say now. We would get together, quite often it was at our house, and have a slumber party. Um, there were one or two times when we invited dates and had a party at somebody's house. Uh, Freshman and sophomore year, we spent somehow a lot of time at Eleanor, Charlotte's house. They had um, good recreation rooms, which we didn't, and many other people didn't. Eleanor particularly had a wonderful recreation room where boys and girls got together, where the girls got together, spent a lot of time together, uh, had much fun. Um, I did well in high school. One of my favorite activities junior and senior year was Central High Register. Mrs. Savage was the teacher, and she was terrific. My senior year, I was one of the editors and enjoyed that tremendously. It was like a big party in the register office. That was one of my main activities. What else? I wasn't in choir because I didn't sing very well. I'm sure there must have been other activities in school that I did, but I can't recall them at this time.
Were there any Jewish clubs that you belonged to?
No, I did not. There were Jewish clubs, but for some reason or another, I was not invited to join, along with just a very few other girls, and I was disappointed. It made me feel bad, but I seemed to live through it. And some of the people who were my good friends were members, some weren't, and it didn't seem to make a lot of difference once that initial uh, being asked or not being asked happened. But I guess there weren't a tremendous number of things that they did that I didn't do. Didn't seem to matter as time went on.
Did you spend a lot of time at the Jewish Community Center?
Fair amount of time, probably not as much as some of the kids, but I certainly did go over there after school. It's not one of the things that really stands out in my mind as being something that I was really into. I think um, I think a lot of times maybe some of the girls and I walk downtown after school. I guess maybe I thought that was more fun. It wasn't that I shopped that much or bought that much, but downtown was a fun place to be then. There were terrific stores, um, and I guess we just went and browsed and did girl things in the stores, and then went home, did homework, and listened to the radio. That was a big thing. Uh, my dad was always, almost always, home for dinner. We had dinner together practically all the time. In our kitchen there was a breakfast nook, and that's where we had most of our meals. Shabbos we would usually have dinner in the dining room. Um, Shabbos was special, and which is nice because it still is.
You had mentioned earlier how you left the one school to take the eighth grade in another school.
Right,
Then after the eighth grade, you went to high school.
right.
Did you carry some of the friends from the new school along to high school with you, or was it all strange?
Well, Uni and I, but that was the Benson neighborhood, so just about everybody at that school went to Benson. Uni and I went to Central. Also in our class was Steve Swartz, who of course went to Central, and Ed Zorinsky was in my class. And as a matter of fact, Ed Zorinsky, I'll go back a few years. There was a Hebrew school, Cheder, at Jewish Community Center, and I don't know why my dad didn't send me there, but he didn't. Instead, for a couple of years, he hired Harry Mendelson to um, to teach, and one year, I think that was just 2 years worth. One year, um, Ed Zorinsky, or maybe both years, Ed Zorinsky and Mel Sherman and I think we're the only three, um, took uh, took those lessons together. I don't know whether the other two learned much. I did not learn a lot there, but we would rotate homes between the Shermans and the Zorinskys and our house. And Mr. Mendelson must have been really poor at the time because he always wanted something to eat. And I remember the mothers fixing eggs and tea and toast and, just a meal for him. And then we would get down to the business of whatever that was, um, learning Hebrew. As I say, I don't remember very much at all. But that was part of my Hebrew education. And then, of course, the bat mitzvah study that we did for 2 years with Cantor Edgar. And I went to Sunday school. And somehow, a lot of the people in Sunday school all knew each other because a lot of them went to Dundee, and I didn't go to Dundee, so uh, I was not part of the in-group in Sunday school, but again, as time went on, some of those people became good friends of mine.
What year did you graduate high school?
46. Just celebrated our 55th class reunion. And as I said, those were good years. Had a lot of fun.
Did you start university that fall?
Yes. Um, and that was the fall of 46. The young men were coming home en masse from um, from being in service. and all the universities gave them first choice, as was the proper thing to do. So many schools were difficult to get into. I don't know, I don't know how many I applied to, maybe not that many, but I was accepted at the University of Missouri and went there for 4 years. Again, enjoyed it a lot. There I did pledge AE and lived in the house for 4 years. My friend Jeannie Galinsky came my second year. She went someplace else her first year. We roomed together and were very close then. And there were a lot of really fine young women there. I had a very good time being a member of the sorority. Uh, haven't stayed in contact with anybody really except Jeannie, and a couple of other people who were Omahans who went there that I see often, but uh, nobody really as close as Jeannie. But most of the girls in the sorority got along very well, and it was a good 4 years.
What was your major while you were in school?
English literature. That and a nickel got you a cup of coffee. um, my father and mother thought that. So, oh, I'll get to those. um, Mother and Daddy thought the proper thing to do after one got out of university was get married. Daddy never wanted me to go to work. I did not work during any summer. Um, and when I got out of school, uh, he said, "No, don't go to work yet." So I didn't go to work that summer. And finally in fall, and you just can't sit around all the time. And I half-heartedly looked for a job. I didn't want to work on Saturdays. It is so different from now. It's almost embarrassing to think about it. But finally, my Uncle Jay Berkavasi, who worked at Service Life, got me a job there. I worked there for about 6 months in a very nothing kind of a job. It was about as unintellectual as one could get. And I was all set to quit and look for something else or maybe move to Chicago or something. And about that time, Bucky invited me to be his wife. So that was about as good a job as I could have looked for.
You mentioned that you enjoyed high school.
I did.
Did you do well in high school?
Yes, I did.
How well did you do?
I was a member of National Honor Society, or the Honor Societies, every year. I loved math, took that for 4 years and got a math award. I wasn't number one in the class, but I wasn't too far down.
Did you carry that same kind of education along to the university?
I did. As a matter of fact, Central High was and probably is still unique. Um, Took a history course there, and my first year in high school, a similar history course was required, and a lot of my sorority sisters struggled with that. I was the tutor. It was by far a better course than was offered at the university.
First year in university.
Yeah.
Eastern High School.
No, my first year in university. Many of the courses that I took at Central helped tremendously in university. I made freshman, sophomore honoraries in university, and mortarboard, which was a senior women's honorary, was a member of that. And one of my favorite activities at the university was being on the board of what was called the Association of Women Students, which I don't remember exactly what we did. I guess um, maybe not rules or some rules that governed women on campus, what they should and shouldn't do. But again, it was a wonderful way of meeting and being with young women who were not Jewish and who were from other sororities or were independent. Uh, so it was great. And the summers during those university years were terrific. Again, um, the young men had just come home from service. They were either going to school or getting started in business or whatever, and there was just a lot of dating going on then. And until you settled down with one and became a couple, um, everybody sort of dated everybody else, and it was great times then. I did date Bucky occasionally then. He asked me out every once in a while.
This is why you're still at the university.
Yes.
So all in all, you had a nice social life and you did very, very well academically.
Right.
So you made the most of your college years.
Now I don't think so. Now I don't think I studied hard enough or took courses that were challenging enough, but it's what I wanted to do then. Uh, I didn't go to school for a career, as most young women do now. I went because I could, because my father was generous and wanted me to have that education, but he certainly didn't think that a career was something that I needed. He was extremely happy when Bucky and I got engaged, as was my mother. I don't remember, oh, I do remember how she met him. When he was a little kid, he sold magazines, and he either called on the telephone to try and sell them magazines, and Mother just thought he was something very special. She was right. And though my parents and his parents were not close friends, they there were things in the community that they did together. They certainly knew each other very well, and Mother and Daddy were very pleased that Bucky and I got together.
I want to hear how that all started.
How Bucky and I got together?
Yes.
It was maybe after my freshman or sophomore year, and again, just everybody sort of knew everybody else, and maybe somebody suggested to him, I'm not sure, that he call me, which he did, and we had nice times together. We didn't date a whole lot. We did correspond a little bit occasionally when we were both at university, and of course he got out. He had uh, quite a bit of college before he finished at Nebraska and got out and went to work. But we saw each other Christmas vacation, not exclusively. Uh, Not exclusively ever until he proposed. Uh, but we went out, and uh, even if we weren't dating, we were very often at the same parties together.
When did he become special in your life? Before you were engaged?
You know, I always knew about Bucky Greenberg, and I always thought that he was, if not the one that I should marry, that I should marry somebody very much like him. I've told some young people that, and they look at me like I have two heads, but I always knew he was very special, and that we do well together. Took him longer to realize that.
When did you get married?
We got married in '51. We just celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary last year.
I want to hear about the wedding.
Well, the wedding was beautiful, and be happy to show you wedding pictures. The wedding was at the Highland Club. It was before the time that the rabbis got together and said all weddings should be at synagogues. The main reason being that the synagogues weren't air conditioned and the hotels or the Highland Club uh, all were. And we got married in June, and you just didn't want to take the chance that it was going to be so hot you weren't comfortable and the guests weren't. So we were married at Highland, probably about 200 people, somewhere around that, because there were a lot of friends and family, local people marry local people, and there are a lot of people that you want to have. And it was on a Tuesday, that being supposedly a lucky day because um, of a biblical reference and superstition. And it was a 6 o'clock wedding. I loved my dress. I loved my bridesmaids' dresses. Bridesmaids were Eleanor Alexander. She was married at the time. My sister was maid of honor. Lee Jane, Bucky's sister, was matron of honor, and Jeannie Galinsky Levy were my honor attendants. It was a beautiful wedding. It was a wonderful dinner. We had, well, before that, of course, there were place cards for the dinner, and Becky couldn't find mine because it said Mrs. Barton Greenberg. He didn't know who the devil that was. But we said it was straight, and I got to sit down. We had an Uncle Lou Morosnick, Bucky's uncle from Canada, who we asked to be master of ceremonies, and he did go on and on and on until our friends at one of the tables started singing "So Long It's Been Good to Know You," at which time, and in those days, one got out of her wedding dress and into a going away suit, and it was probably 11 o'clock at night. How far could we go? But it was a wonderful wedding.
Where did you go on your honeymoon?
We went to Banff, Canada. We went by car. We had 3 weeks. We went through Glacier Park. We went through Wyoming and Montana with a few stops on the way, and we're in Banff at the Banff Springs Hotel for, I think, close to 2 weeks of the time. Um, Bucky introduced me to fishing because he couldn't get that close to water and not fish. And we went out he was pretty good about it, but we went out one day, he took me out, and it was cold. And I think I had about 7 layers on. And he didn't have all the right equipment. He caught one fish that was really huge, and he couldn't land it. And in my mind, I thought, I know if he had to choose between that fish and me, I would have been the one to go overboard. But the fish got loose. He had caught another one that was really quite large, and we took it to the hotel. That wasn't in Banff. That was in one of the other stops on the way back. And they cooked it for us for dinner, and that was a lot of fun. We had a wonderful time.
A lot of good memories from that.
A lot of
time.
good memories. A lot of good memories. We came back, and again, there hadn't been any housing built during the war years, so apartments were very hard to get, but because he worked for the H.A. Wolf Company, who was into real estate, we got an apartment at the Elegant, what's the name of it? No,
Hamilton?
no, no, on 30th and Dodge, where we lived. Turner Court, yes, very elegant, very tiny. My mother, in her very sweet, gracious way, said, "It's cozy." My father said, "It's cramped." But we were there for several months, and it was just fine. Of course, the one thing that did happen very shortly after our marriage, which was great sadness in our life, was Bucky's dad died. And that was that was a tough time. It was, of course, much tougher on him than on me, and was a difficult time for anybody, and certainly for newlyweds. But we were together, and we weathered it, and hopefully helped his mother weather it. They had been extremely close and extremely loving, and she was devastated by his death. But as young people, we after the period of mourning, we went on with our lives, and uh, let's see, oh, maybe 9 or 10 months after we were married, we moved to a fourplex on 39th and Dewey, and that was really very nice. We loved it. We had 2 bedrooms, lovely living room, dining room, kitchen. It was modern for the time. It had been recently built, and our daughter Beth was born there. She was born about a little over 3 years after we were married. And so we lived there until she was a year old, and the other people in the apartment weren't crazy about having a baby there. And it was time for us to have a home anyhow. And we bought well, we thought it was and it was a terrific house on 54th and Grant, which was very close to where my parents were living at the time. They were still in the same house. It had a lovely backyard, front yard, uh, had a terrific, uh, I shouldn't even call it a basement, but terrific recreation room, and it was fun to have company down there. I remember the bar particularly was really beautiful, and so it was fun to have parties down there. Bucky had gone into business for himself, and since we didn't, that was shortly after we were married also, since we didn't have any children, it seemed pretty silly to hire a secretary, receptionist, whatever, and I said I should do this, which I did. I was bookkeeper. My dad taught me how to keep books, and I took a correspondence insurance course, so I would know a little bit about what people were talking about when they called, and I enjoyed it a lot. It beat playing cards every day. And after Beth was born, I still did a lot of the bookkeeping. I was able to take it home. And it was not the days of small calculators. The calculator was huge, and I would schlep that thing back and forth between the office and home so I could work at home sometime, but it worked out just fine. Beth was born about a month premature, and for a preemie, she was a little over 5 pounds, so that was good. No problems really, and we were thrilled with her, as just about everybody is with their babies. Um, when she was about a year, we moved into our home, as I said, and we sent her off to nursery school when she was maybe 3, had wonderful teachers. Belle Katz was one of them. Ruthie Sokoloff was another one. Uh, we didn't know how lucky she really was, and she didn't know how lucky she really was. It was a great nursery school, and they invited each other to play and to birthday parties and to all those good things. And she started school at Harrison. She went through kindergarten, first, second grade, I think, at Harrison. There aren't a lot of memories. One of them, I guess, is that Mother and Daddy were wonderful babysitters, as was Mom Greenberg. They all loved to babysit for her, so we didn't have many babysitting problems. Um, we also lived not too far from Judy and Stuart. And John and their oldest and Beth are fairly close in age. Uh, their third and our Joe are close in age. The kids were all close. We usually alternated Friday nights between Mom Greenberg and Mother and Daddy. And Friday night at Mother and Daddy's was with the Tullys and their kids, and at Mom Greenberg's was the Parsos and their kids. And they all grew up together, and I just think it's too bad that now those kids are all dispersed so that the cousins don't know each other anymore. But that's the way it is. Joe was born 3 years after Beth. Not 3 years, 5 years after, 5.5 years after Beth. And we moved to the house we are in now in 63. And we've been here ever since. So, as I said at the beginning, I haven't lived in a whole lot of different places. The kids essentially grew up here, went to school at Arbor Heights and Arbor Heights Junior High and Westside High School. Beth went to, she didn't, after, how should I go back? She grew up in the difficult 70s. She was in high school in the difficult 70s. And she was a rebel. And it was not always easy. She didn't like West Side. She didn't like the values that most of the kids had. She had some very good friends at Central, a young man that she was very close to off and on for a time. But when she was a senior, she decided she wanted to finish by correspondence, which she did, and she also took courses at Creighton. It wasn't because she didn't like school. She did, and she was very good. She wasn't sure what she wanted to do, so she was at university here off and on, and then she decided she had to go to Paris. Had to. And she was very good in French. And she found this, all I can call it is sort of a school, but the credentials were okay, and she was to live with a French family. And off she went at age 17. I know our friends thought we were absolutely crazy to let her do it, but I guess there was more inside of us that said she should than she shouldn't. In December of that year, Bucky couldn't stand it anymore, and he said, "You've got to go." So I did, and we had a good time together. At that time, she said, "School isn't so great. I've made arrangements, and I'm going to Israel." Okay, what are you going to do in Israel? Going to live on a kibbutz, which she did for a while. She went to Marseille to uh, take the ship to Israel, and she met a man on the ship who was quite a bit older and who became a very good friend and who kind of looked after her. He lived in Jerusalem. She was on the kibbutz for a little while, and it was out of the way, so she really didn't get to do a lot in Israel that she wanted, and she moved to Jerusalem, where he helped her find a job, and I think she lived in part of his house. Um, Also had contact with cousins of ours who lived and still live in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and she was there for several months. Came home and um, eventually went to University of Wisconsin and graduated there. Still wasn't sure what she wanted to do. Went to Cleveland because her boyfriend was there, mainly waited tables. Came home one time and said, I'm going to apply to architecture schools, which she did, got accepted to the University of Colorado and got her architecture degree, met her future husband, and she now lives in New York, still an architect. She and her husband have no children. They're both architects. She now has a partnership in the firm, so she's doing very well. We're extremely proud of her. Um, Joe was a little bit more conventional. Um, Enjoyed school and high school, and when he finished high school, decided he wanted to go to um, University of Michigan. Huge school. He went there. He was accepted, um, but it was much too big for him, and he was very unhappy. Nobody has to be that unhappy. We said, come home. It's okay. He went to UNO for, I think, a year and a half, and then decided he wanted to go to George Washington in D.C., which he did, and enjoyed it a lot. Took an electrical engineering course, and was really nothing in Omaha in the way of electrical engineering, and went to Los Angeles and was with Hughes um, Aircraft or whatever Hughes, the big Hughes company, for 7 years and decided it's boring. What I really want is to be an accountant. And he quit his job, took a year off, used the money that he had saved up, went to UCLA for a year, studied accounting, uh, got his degree, passed CPA, first first crack out of the box, and has had several jobs and is now with Deloitte and Touche. One of the big pluses from that is he met his wife, uh, Terry. They knew each other for well, not too terribly long before they got engaged. Now married, live in Sherman Oaks, have two children, Lauren, who is 7, Kevin, who is 4. And of course, they're the delight of our lives. Anything else I can tell you?
I think I'd like to have you sum up your life with a message that you would like to leave for your children and grandchildren.
I guess my life couldn't be much better. Uh, I am so grateful for all the good things. We have enjoyed good health, um, and a message for our children and grandchildren is we wish you a good life. We wish you an ethical life. Uh, we have every reason to believe that you know what is good, what is right, and what is wrong. Um, we wish you the same kind of contentment that we have had.
Thank you, Caryl.
Thank you, Ben.